This video is intended to provide a basic demonstration of Infometrics InfoBatch flexible electronic reporting solution. I will begin by showing how users can interactively generate reports through the InfoBatch web client. Here, the user is logging into the web client as the InfoBatch user. The user then begins to query for a batch. The query dialog allows the user to search for a batch based upon a time range, batch ID, or recipe name. Once the time range is set, the query is performed, and InfoBatch returns a list of all batches that have completed within the start and end times specified. The user selects a batch from the results and adds it to their list. A batch summary report is generated for the batch selected. Once complete, the report is opened for review. The batch summary report includes key information about the batch execution. Here we can see the batch details, product name, and recipe information. Beneath that, we have a unit summary table which lists each piece of equipment utilized during each unique unit procedure. Next, we have a unit alarms table which lists critical or warning alarms for the units acquired during the batch. InfoBatch utilizes its native context and unit mapping capability to ensure that the alarms associated with the equipment acquired over the duration of each unit procedure are the only alarms included on the batch report. Here, we have a process data trend with high and low limits, as well as some statistics. This is an example of using context from one data source, in this case a batch historian, to retrieve contextualized data from a separate data source, a process historian. In this example, the start and end time of a single unit procedure, along with the unit information, is used to retrieve the temperature values. InfoBatch evaluates the temperature values against the limits and performs an average and minimum and maximum calculation. Next, we'll demonstrate how to configure a new report through the InfoBatch configurator. The user begins to create a new report and specifies the output format as PDF. Required fields such as report name, output processing, and hierarchy are completed. Library configuration is mapped to the report through the Library Dependencies tab. The user selects the appropriate libraries, in this case, the ISDB-HISDB libraries, for their report development. You can see the user is selecting a variety of libraries for ISDB-HISDB that contain data queries, report output expressions, images, styling, as well as formatting. Once complete, the user will create the new report and version 1 will appear in the configuration tree. The first step of our report configuration is building out the structure beneath the data folder. The user begins by adding a procedure context query from the ISDB-HISDB library. They specify the data source and then move on to add a procedure context object. These steps are repeated to add a unit procedure context query and unit procedure level to the report. Next, the user begins adding data queries to the report. The batch data library allows the user to easily add common data types from the batch historian. In this example, the user is adding batch data. Next, the user adds a unit alarms query from the alarms and event data library. The display output folder is used to manage the data output and formatting of the report. Here, you'll see the user is taking advantage of the batch report output library by adding the report summary output. Next, they'll use the alarms and events report output library to add the unit alarms output expression. The configurator allows the user to test their report development by generating a report directly through the client. You can see the report contains a header and two sections, one for the report summary and another for the unit alarms. The user resumes their report configuration after checking the progress. First, they edit the unit procedure context object and rename it to all unit procedures. Then they add a second unit procedure context object and update the start and end source fields with a specific unit procedure name. They label this unit procedure as charge tank transfer. The user adds a tag to the charge tank transfer unit procedure. The tag browser allows the user to select the relevant tag from their continuous historian. In this example, temperature is selected. InfoBatch supports a variety of actions for process data. Here, the user adds a trend with a 10-second interval, as well as average, minimum, and maximum calculations. The corresponding output expression sourced from the time series output library is added to the display output folder. The report is generated a second time to view the updated report output. Here you can see we now have a report section for the charge tank transfer unit procedure with a temperature trend and statistics. Limits are configured for the temperature data. Here, the user is adding a high and low control limit. Next, an outlier action is added. The outlier action will produce exception records on the InfoBatch report if the process data exceeds a limit. Next, the trend properties are modified to add grid lines and display the high limit. For the final report generation, the user navigates back to the web client and generates the batch report. We now see there were 2 temperature data exceptions during the charge tank transfer unit procedure. InfoBatch records the time of each exception, in this case when the temperature value exceeded the high limit, as well as when the data returned to within normal range. This concludes the demonstration on how to configure an InfoBatch exception report.